So, I wanted to talk today about social dominance orientation, what it is and why we care. I would call it essentially the psychology behind the need for power. Now, Americans like to imagine that political beliefs spring from reasoned arguments, moral principles, or careful study of the issues. But decades of research suggests something far more unsettling, which is that much of our political worldview is rooted in deep psychological orientations that shape how we see the world long before we ever choose a party. So, two of the most powerful and probably least understood are social dominance orientation and right wing authoritarianism, or SDO and RWA. They're not buzzwords or partisan insults. They're measurable psychological traits that help explain why our politics feels increasingly zero sum, punitive, and existential. And together they form the backbone of one of the most influential political movements of our time. Social dominance orientation is a person's preference for group based hierarchy, essentially the belief that some groups should naturally dominate others. High SDO individuals see society as a competitive ladder where someone must be on top and therefore someone must be on the bottom. They're comfortable with inequality and often support policies that maintain or restore group advantage. Right wing authoritarianism, by contrast, is driven by a desire for order, conformity, and strong leadership. The high RWA individuals see the world as dangerous and morally chaotic. They want clear rules, harsh punishment for rule breakers, and leaders who promise to protect the in group from perceived threats. These traits are distinct, but they're not random. They predict political attitudes with remarkable consistency, from immigration to policing to welfare to civil rights. And when they combine, they create a worldview that is unusually coherent, emotionally charged, and resistant to counter evidencing. When SDO and RWA merge, politics becomes perceived as a battle for survival, producing a political psychology with several defining features. High SDO individuals see society as a competition between groups, gains for them or losses for us. While RWA adds the emotional punch, those gains aren't just unfair, they're dangerous. Authoritarians have a high desire for protection, while dominance oriented individuals want a champion. Together, they produce an intense loyalty to leaders who promise to fight on their behalf, or on the behalf of the in group, even when that means breaking norms to attack institutions. RWA frames outgroups as threats to order, while SDO frames them as rivals for social status. The result is support for harsh immigration enforcement, aggressive policing, and exclusionary nationalism. Equality feels destabilizing to both traits, perceived as a threat to hierarchy for SDO and a threat to tradition for RWA. Movements for racial justice, gender equality, and LGBTQ plus rights are interpreted not as expansions of freedoms, but as assaults on the existing social structure. This isn't about policy disagreements. It's about fundamentally different visions of how society should be organized. In the United States, these psychological orientations map clearly onto the political landscape. High SDO individuals tend to gravitate towards ideologies that defend hierarchy, such as economic individualism, nationalism, punitive criminal justice, and skepticism towards redistributive policies. High RWA individuals gravitate toward ideals that defend tradition, obedience, and social order. When a political movement offers both a promise to restore dominance and a promise to restore order, it becomes a psychological home for people high in both traits. That's why these orientations help explain the emotional intensity the sense of threat, and the uncompromising posture that defines so much of our political discourse. They illuminate why some voters respond so strongly to narratives of decline, demographic change, or cultural transformation. And they explain why appeals to empathy, fairness, or shared humanity often fall flat. Those appeals speak a different psychological language. Understanding SDO and RWA doesn't excuse harmful behavior or justify exclusionary politics, but it does help us understand why persuasion is so difficult, why polarization feels so entrenched, and why political conflict increasingly resembles a struggle over identity rather than ideas. People high in SDO and RWA aren't simply choosing policies. They're defending a worldview, one where hierarchy is natural, order is essential, and threats are everywhere. People low in these traits aren't just advocating equality, they're defending a worldview where cooperation is possible, diversity is enriching, and power should be constrained. These aren't just political differences, they're psychological ones. And until we acknowledge that, we just keep talking past each other, mistaking deep rooted orientations for mere disagreements over tax rates or border policy.